Hi, everybody. Hope you're having a great Friday night. One more time with feeling. This is What's It To Ya with Carter and Jack. Yes, indeed. It is our final go-round for this show, our final episode of the year. And we're going to take a look back this time around at all of the great stuff that we've been able to cover on the show, all the sports that we've seen go by since we went on the air back in October. We're going to take a look at a lot of different stuff. Our favorite press conference, our funniest moment, our best breakout performance, the best New York sports team performance, and a whole lot more, including our very favorite thing that we covered on this show. And it's all coming up. What's It To Ya? It starts right now. And we say hello once again from Columbia High School Studio 1A. This is What's It To Ya. I am Carter Woodiel, and he is Jack Worth. It's our final show. Can you believe it, Jack? It seems like it just started yesterday, but when you really think about it, we've covered a huge variety of topics on the show so far.
And it seems like we just started, and when we look back like this at all the things we've covered, it brings back these memories that they do seem just like such a short time ago, because I remember covering these topics on the show, the stuff we're about to go into right now. So we're going to start with best breakout performance. The athlete who's burst onto the scene in the 2013-2014 year. Who have you got?
I'm looking at Jose Abreu, and this one's a little bit difficult because he's a baseball player. The season is still ongoing, and he might fall right off the table, but boy, has he been hot. His first 56 games, 19 homers, 51 runs batted in, and a 265 batting average that's definitely respectable. This is a guy that we really did not see coming at all, and certainly something that this White Sox fan base is certainly happy to see, considering they don't have much else to cheer for right now.
And I'm gonna go in a different direction. Gonna go basketball. I'm picking Lance Stevenson as my breakout player of the year for the last year. In terms of on the court production, he's transformed from a guy that no one really knew of outside of this, the state of Indiana, a second-round draft pick 3 years ago, to a borderline Eastern Conference All-Star. It's different than a real All-Star, but still a borderline Eastern Conference All-Star. But really, Lance Stevenson, just in terms of breaking out, has gone, probably the most well-known, the most polarizing, the most entertaining player on one of the best teams in the NBA.
It's been surprising because in this NBA that seems so kind of entrenched, we often see, it's often really great to see a guy like Lance Stevenson come out and prove his worth. Of course, it wasn't enough for his team to get to the finals of his Heat and Spurs, as we've already seen. Let's take a look other side of the coin. What's your biggest disappointment that we covered on the show?
This one, a lot easier for me to pick out. I think it's got to be the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos result in the Super Bowl. So the Denver Broncos coming out, after this incredible season they're coming out against the Seahawks, and from the first play of the game, the first snap that goes sailing over Peyton Manning's head into the end zone for a safety, they never turned it around from there. So that's the biggest disappointment of the year is the Denver Broncos play in the Super Bowl.
I can remember watching that safety flyover. I can remember watching the super slow-mo of Peyton Manning slowly realizing the ball was heading over his head and thinking, maybe this just isn't Denver's night. That's certainly incredibly disappointing. One other thing I want to point out, though, also on the gridiron, the Florida Gators football team, they were ranked 10th in the preseason, and they wound up going 4-8, finishing off the season with 7 consecutive losses, including a loss to Georgia Southern at home by a score of 26-20. The 10th ranked team in the preseason losing to Georgia Southern. What is that if not disappointing?
And you look at the Florida schedule. You take a look at their season. It was a season that from the beginning had signs that that this might not be the season they expected.
Right.
They beat Toledo the first week, scored 24 points. I don't know how convincing that is, and then turn around the next week and lose to Miami, who not taking anything away from Miami, but this is a team that over the last 10 years Florida has dominated in this rivalry. They get a couple wins against the bottom feeders in the SEC, and then after October 5th, never win again for the rest of the season.
It's really, really tough, and it might show you just how the preseason rankings in college football might not always be entirely correct if you're talking about predicting future performance. Press conferences. I know you and I are both really fond of watching press conferences go by. What is your favorite press conference that you've seen over the time that this show's been on the air?
So my favorite press conference has come pretty recently, and then even more recently has been in the news again, due to a response to the comment. But mine was from United States soccer team coach Jurgen Klinsmann. who's questioned by reporters about cutting Landon Donovan after all Landon's done for the team, in 2010, 2006, even 2002. And he says, well, this is soccer. This is my team, and we're not going to run it like the Los Angeles Lakers, who just gave Kobe Bryant $50 million over the next 2 years. He just signed a contract extension last December, and this is a guy who hasn't done anything all year because he hasn't played. But, so the concept that he brought up is, how can the Lakers really think that he's going to be worth $50 million the next 2 years? And he goes, well, they don't. They're rewarding him for, the greatness that he had in the past. And I love that because I agree completely. And when I saw that, I go, you know what, Jurgen Klinsmann could be an NBA GM and probably get his team to the playoffs.
And it's crazy. I have a Jurgen Klinsmann quote here too. It's not the one that you were talking about before, but it's the same way of him kind of looking at something that we take for granted in the USA and saying, is that really something that we should do? It's from last Wednesday. He reiterated a point that he made earlier. He said, we have to be realistic. Every year we're getting stronger, but for now, talking about winning a World Cup is not realistic. I.e., he's basically saying the USA can't win the World Cup. That's something that everybody knows, but everybody was so surprised. Here's the coach of the team saying they have no shot at winning, but they don't. And it seems like that to have the coach actually step back, take a rational and honest look at his team's chances, that's really refreshing for me. I was so happy to see this.
And that's something that, when you're someone who follows soccer, especially soccer that's not stateside, you go overseas, this is something... This trend of coaches being a lot more honest and a lot more straightforward is something that happens and something that does not happen here. You have coaches who, when they're presented with a question like that, they have to say, well, we're going to take it one game at a time, and by golly, we'll see what happens. But I like the way Jurgen's being straightforward. And a lot of times, that was a quote that I think was taken out of context. If I can remember, remember the question, it started with what is considered as a success for the United States at this year's World Cup, and he goes, for us, reaching the semifinal would be a dream.
Yep.
Which it would be, and then I think if I'm correct, it was followed up with, well, what about making the final? So I think Jurgen Klinsmann has great expectations for this United States squad. If by some stroke of God they end up playing in the World Cup final, I don't think we can question Jurgen Klinsmann's enthusiasm for being there.
Absolutely. And he added, at the end of that quote, if this is American or not, you can correct me. It's certainly not American, but that doesn't mean it isn't the right way to go in this situation. Funniest moment, our final one before we go to our break of the sporting year. How about we start with yours?
Well, mine is one we talked about earlier in the year. Again, we're gonna go back to the football season, the college football season, and mine is way back in November, before Auburn became the team of destiny. Their first glimpse at the fact that something supernatural could be going on in that final play against the Georgia Bulldogs, when the pass was deflected out of the air and into the hands of the Auburn receiver, who ran 70 yards down the field for a touchdown. The Georgia coaches on the sideline, they had a camera on them as they watched the play unfold, and as they see the Hail Mary pass being tipped, you start to see their reaction in terms of, they understand they're going to win the game, and then the ball falls into the hands of the Auburn player, and they realize there's no one in front of him to make the tackle, and they just collapse onto the ground, just all the coaches falling down onto the turf. That was, for me, the funniest moment of the season. That could be because I'm an Auburn fan, but that was very funny.
Well, I laughed out loud when I saw that, when I saw all of them fall. One of them actually kicked his back legs up into the air. It was incredible. But I've got a moment actually from the ice. Mike Smith, again, in a game against the Buffalo Sabres, he's in goal, he's ready to go, and it's in overtime. The game is tied, under 2 minutes to play in overtime, and the puck kicks up and lands right in his back pocket, right in his pants there. Doesn't see it, backs up into the goal. The puck crosses the goal line, and the game is over on a pants own goal. It was so weird, to watch the footage of this, because nobody in the arena really knew what had just happened. They couldn't comprehend. All they were wondering, where the hell, where's the puck? Where did it go? In his pants? Are you serious? And the game is over because of that. It's just a really, really weird ending to a hockey game.
How did the refs see that? I haven't seen the play. How did the refs? They know.
At first, they had no idea what happened. At first, they were skating around. They wound up blowing the horn for the game-winning goal, but because they figured, if the puck isn't there, it had to have gone in somehow. But it took them a very long time to actually sort out exactly what happened. And with that kind of situation, you can't blame them for not knowing what's going on.
And it's something that we've seen in hockey before, but I don't think we are, the puck going in and no one's really sure what happens. The horn doesn't go off, but I think it's safe to say that specific situation we haven't seen before and we probably will never see again.
And that happens all the time in sports, and hopefully we'll see something a little bit later. We are not done here. We've got plenty of other awards to get to, including the Best New York Sports Team Performance, our Journalist of the Year, and of course our favorite moment that we've covered so far on the show. What's It To Ya's final segment is 30 seconds away.
Slow down.
Slow down and move over.
And move over.
When you see lights,
vests,
Or reflectors.
please give us some room. Slow down and move over.
when you need us.
We've got your back.
Do you have ours?
You got our back?
You got ours? You got our back? Please, slow down.
And move over.
My songs know what you did.
And welcome back to What's It To Ya's final episode. We're taking a look back here on Carter Woodiel. He is Jack Worth, and we are looking back at some of our favorite moments that we've been able to cover since we've gone on the show in October. Let's get right back to our awards. We're going to start with the best performance by a local sports team here in New York. I think you'd agree that for most of our time on the show, we were watching New York sports teams that did not live up to expectations, but there was one that did better than most people thought at the beginning of the year.
Well, I mean, absolutely. You talk about the New York Rangers, who just recently had their season concluded a lot later than most people thought. But like you said, when we first started this show, this first couple weeks, because, personally, I'm a fan of all the New York sports teams, and I'm thinking, this is a really rough year to be a New York sports fan. If you're a Yankee fan, we just missed the playoffs. If you're a Met fan, you still haven't made the playoffs. The Giants and Jets both struggled. The Nets and Rangers, both teams I'm a fan of, struggled out of the gate. They got their season sort of back on track later, but for that first couple of weeks, it sure looks like this is going to be a rough year for us New York fans.
We were talking on the show about when the Nets and the Rangers were struggling about how possibly the New York area, the 9 major teams, would not see a playoff team. Over the course of a year. That did not happen, obviously. The Rangers made the run to the Stanley Cup Finals, and the Nets had their own respectable run as well.
Except, we did say, none of the 9 major sports teams in the area, back in the fall, when it really looked like things were getting rough here in New York, the New York Red Bulls, sort of on the other side of the coin, started out great. They finished with the best record in the regular season out of anyone in the MLS. They won their first trophy for doing so. And then had a very disappointing playoff, losing in the first round.
Yeah.
But for a long time, it looked like, the best New York team would be the Red Bulls.
Let's move on to our next award, the Journalist of the Year. Your favorite guy in sports media that we've been able to talk about on the show. Who you got?
Well, personally, we haven't talked about it on the show, but personally, a guy that I love recently has been Zach Lowe, who primarily does NBA coverage on Grantland, Bill Simmons's little thing. I don't know what it is. It's not really ESPN, but it's Bill Simmons's personal
it's his
playground.
journalist as brand,
So, at the beginning of the year, one piece that I loved was Simmons and Lowe, covering the trade deadline in sort of pseudo live email back and forth, and then they posted it the next day, and it was hilarious because I'm a big Simmons fan. But the thing with Simmons is that when you read him enough, he starts to, you start to get a little tired because, the thing with Simmons is at the end of the day, you can only take so many Shawshank Redemption, references. You get like, Bill, we know you've seen the movie. You're a cool guy. Great. Zach Lowe is totally on the other hand. I think he's a robot. Personally, I think Zach Lowe might be a robot. The way he just displays how basketball works is something that is so interesting because, the way he talks about the little things and how games are won in each play where all 5 players are on the floor. After every game in the finals, it's like, well, let's really find out what happened. Let's go. I'm going to go consult Zach Lowe. So over the NBA postseason, he was the first guy I turned to. He was my favorite journalist of the year.
And you said that we didn't talk about it specifically on the show, but you bet we used a lot of the stuff that he came up with on the show. He's been for me as well, especially before these NBA Finals. His NBA Finals preview was fantastic. Looking in and like you said, the little things. I'm also going to go with basketball with my Journalist of the Year, but it's not the pro game, it's college, and I'm going to go with Jay Billis of ESPN. He's always been one of my favorite guys But this year he became, even more of a big deal in a good way. Do you remember when he took the NCAA on via Twitter? Remember that? It was when Johnny Manziel, the football star, was caught signing autographs and selling them, and the NCAA was furious about this. Of course, Jay Billis rationally realizes, well, he's a famous athlete. He can sell his autographs if he wants to. And then pointed out some serious hypocrisy in the NCAA. He went on the NCAA.com shop, their online store, typed in Manziel into the search bar, and lo and behold, look, it's a bunch of Texas A&M number 2 jerseys. And Billis posts this picture to Twitter and says they're profiting from his name. Why can't he do the same thing? He does it again for Braxton Miller. He does it again for Jadeveon Clowney. He does it again for Taj Boyd, I believe, of Clemson. And the NCAA removed its search function and was publicly shamed by a guy who is so good at using Twitter and using these forms of new media to be, a big face and a big voice of this issue that he cares strongly about. And not to mention, he's the smartest college basketball analyst that's out there today.
Well, that's when you talk about guys who are the journalist of the year, someone who's really done something this year, because that's a huge step for Jay Billis, who's he's known as the guy who you can look at the NCAA tournament bracket 8 months before Selection Sunday,
Yeah.
and now he's known as the guy who who takes on the hypocrisy that is the NCAA, and is not even in basketball and college football. That's something that's a great thing to see, and it's a great thing for Billis, for Billis's career, his legitimacy in journalism.
Our next award is our favorite upset, our favorite thing that we've seen, the favorite underdog story that we've been able to cover on the show. For me, if you're going for upsets, the first place you turn is March Madness, and this year did not disappoint the UConn Huskies, a 7 seed that Nate Silver gave less than a 1% chance of winning the national championship, did just that. They defeated the Kentucky Wildcats in the championship game. I don't see how you can't say that there's a better upset, but do you think so?
I don't. I went back and forth on this one because I was a big fan of UConn before the tournament, just in terms of a team, that's not in the top 4 seeds in a bracket that can still make a run. But when you talk about making a run versus winning a championship, there's a huge difference. So I think when you look at it that way, maybe it wasn't an upset that they broke seed and went to the Sweet 16 or even the Elite 8, because I think a lot of people knew this team had talent.
Yeah.
But when you talk about making the Final Four, making the championship game, winning the championship game, that sequence of events, that's the best upset we've had this year.
And it's incredible, and I can't recall if the CBS announcer pointed out, it might have been Jim Nance on the game, but he made a really interesting point about how in the American Athletic Conference championship game in Memphis, UConn took on Louisville and was absolutely shellacked in that neutral site game. They were totally ran over, and what happened was everybody jumped on the Louisville bandwagon saying this is the team that's going to win the championship, me included. And UConn was pretty much, to imagine that after that loss in their final, regular season game, for them to go and rattle off every win that they needed to cut down the Nets in the Final Four, that's about as upset as it gets.
And yeah, well, I hadn't even looked at it that way. I totally forgot, but I agree with you completely. We both picked on this show together Louisville to win the championship, and it's a UConn team that enters the tournament completely blown out by that same Louisville team. I think the selection committee. I think because that's a huge reason why the selection committee gave them that 7 seed. A lot of people talked about the next couple days. The selection committee really, they hurt the AAC this year. They showed that SMU got left out. I think a lot of the AAC teams were underseeded. But, you point to that game and you say, how could you have seen this UConn run coming? They were just killed by the Louisville Cardinals.
And it's just absolutely incredible to see something like that happen. But March Madness rarely disappoints when you're talking about big upsets. Our next award that we're going to get ready to get to, it's one very specific to this show. I want to talk about something that you remember from happening in this studio on the show. I know you've got one in mind that maybe the viewers at home didn't even realize happened.
I'd like to think that no one realized this happened. And, we did, to be fair, we did, I think, run it back once and, go over this. But there was one episode, I don't even know what we were talking about, but I couldn't stop coughing. Not just like coughing, but really bad coughing. And so Carter would start speaking, and I would give him a little sign like, I'm about to lose it. And then I'd run off set. I'd just sort of go away. And I'd run away, I'd cough it all out. And Carter, to his credit, did an amazing job. He just kept talking.
I remember that. I remember seeing that. I think we were talking about the NBA or the playoffs or something, and I had this little moment where I'm looking into this camera right here, and I see Jack run off into the other room and start, coughing his guts out, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna look over to Jack's seat, and I'm gonna act like I'm talking to him, and I'm gonna keep going until he finds his way back into the chair. And we made it through that show. We did a pretty good job.
And it wasn't just once. This is like it kept going. I think that the first time was the worst, but
Yeah.
all night I would just, unprompted, leave, cough, drink some water, and Carter just kept going. He did a great job. I think there was one point where it was like, it was almost in the script. It was ready for you to turn it over to me. So it was my turn to offer thoughts. And I'm 100 feet down the hall. And you just sort of kept going, and you had a nice little conversation with yourself. And it was great. And I don't think, I watched it. And I tried in my mind to watch it as a viewer. And nothing really seemed off with it.
Yeah, your voice was a little raspier, and you had that big bottle of water right underneath the desk for when you needed it. But that was a great job to conceal that whole thing. I remember a moment. It actually happened. You weren't in the studio, but it was during the debate of the week, which we've had off and on, and it was me and you were we joked that you were locked in a Sochi bathroom, but you were out somewhere, and Bobby Krause was sitting in the seat across from me, and we were debating about the pitch clock in Major League Baseball, and I remember. We start the debate. Bobby talks about how it's bad, doesn't want clock in baseball, blah, blah, blah. And I, in 2 minutes, basically run down the entire argument of why it's supposed to happen. And then at the end, as the kicker, I pull out in my notes a rule in the MLB rule book that stipulates for a pitch clock. And Bobby, we love Bobby. He's done a wonderful job as a fill-in host for us, really. And he came in there and he sat and he said, well, I think you've turned me over to the other side of this argument. And for the rest of the debate, we talk about how it can be implemented. We talk about how pitchers are going to react. Because I switched Bobby over in that 2 minute, that 2 minute rant about pitch clocks.
And there's something to be said about admitting when you're wrong.
Yep, absolutely.
But when the segment is titled Debate of the Week, that's one of the times that you don't admit you're wrong. Because I've been on that same position where I'm like, I think you got me on that one. But I'm gonna keep saying ridiculous stuff because I need to think that I'm right. And Bobby came up here. This is his first time too. It's not easy, especially because Carter's very good. Carter is very good and usually doesn't tell you his argument beforehand, so you're not ready.
When I put in the notes to the show, I'll sometimes leave them because we get the same notes. I'll leave them like cryptically in there, so you don't really know what they mean. Only I can know, So yeah, it's really tough. And you're absolutely right. I've had moments. I remember the Olympics versus World Cup debate. I was already a little bit, I was already a little on the other side. You were arguing that the World Cup was better than the Olympics, and I was arguing the opposite way. And I remember during the show thinking, oh man, he's really coming at me right here. But it was a great segment because of that. And we had debates that we won, we had debates that we lost. But it was a really wonderful thing to have that back and forth, that tug of war almost.
Well, it's good to have a tug of war when you're tugging from two separate sides. It's not really the same if I go to your side and we just start pulling the same direction. But Bobby came in. He recovered. We brought him back in a couple weeks ago, more than once, and he really did. He did a great job.
And it's been great to have other people here at the desk besides me and you, and that's been one of my favorite things about covering the show as well. Okay, our final award goes out to our favorite moment that we were able to cover on this show. It's an unforgettable moment. Here is Rod Bramblett on the call with Auburn Radio, The Unforgettable Return by Chris Davis.
All right, here we go. 56-yarder. Does not have the leg. And Chris Davis takes it in the back of the end zone. He'll run it out to the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game. Auburn's going to win the football game. He ran the missed field goal back. He ran it back 109 yards. They're not going to keep him off the field tonight. Holy cow. Oh, my God. Auburn wins. Auburn has won the Iron Bowl.
Whew. My favorite part of that video is when the color guy jumps in. You can tell that over the entire course of that return, he's desperately trying not to blurt something out. And finally, oh my God, as he crosses the 40-yard line. Where were you when this happened? I'm sure you remember.
I absolutely remember. I was watching in a living room with a friend of mine who, he's the reason I'm an Auburn fan. This friend who I'm watching with, that's how I became an Auburn fan. And to see what's the greatest moment of this year, probably the greatest moment in Auburn football history, one of the greatest moments in the history of college football, is something that I absolutely will never forget.
I would tell you exactly what I said during and after that return, but we're on TV, so I can't. I mean, it was that kind of moment where I just couldn't keep myself from just yelling at the top of my lungs about how on earth is this happening? Because it's incredible to see, just how I think every fan who was watching that game kind of went through the same, sequence of thoughts. They come in, they see the kick, they realize that it's going to land short. Oh, look at that, he's returning it. Oh, okay. Oh boy, he's moving left. And then everybody kind of had that moment where they realized that it's all fat guys on the field for Alabama. Chris Davis has a hole on that left sideline, and he's going to get through and probably score the game-winning touchdown. And that moment was unforgettable.
I mean, I remember I pointed out before the kick, I said, they got a guy right there under, and he was off the screen. So I remember pointing to below the television saying, he's right here. If they had him, he would be here. Then I thought the kick was in, and I was like, well, it's over now. And then as soon as he catches it and starts bolting for that left sideline, what's going through my mind is he's going to avoid these guys, and he's going to run out of bounds. It looks like he's running straight for the sideline, and then he does this, it wasn't a rounded turn. It was an angle turn. He's running, and suddenly he's sprinting down the sideline. It was really an incredible play all around.
And another crazy thing is that right before it, there was this whole 4 to 5 minute delay where we're wondering if there's even enough time to get that field goal off. I mean, the Alabama running back comes in. We're looking at a super slow-mo of his cleat touching the out-of-bounds line to see if it touched before or after the clock went all zeros. They went a fraction of a second. They had a fraction of a second of time left. And to think they gave Alabama the time and they wound up losing because of it. I remember I was joking, okay, they're getting ready to start up overtime. And it never happened because that field goal landed short.
Well, I think they were ready to start up overtime. And if I remember correctly, I remember Saban sprinting onto the field. To me, that just makes this even more golden than it already is.
That is irony for you, and it is just one of the incredible moments that we've been able to cover on this show. It's really just been incredible to come in and to just take a look, as we said at the top of the broadcast, at everything. From this New York sports team, from the national scene to the local scene. We talked about everything from Michael Jordan to Masahiro Tanaka, from MLB to MLS, from the World Cup in Brazil to the Ultimate Frisbee right here in Maplewood. And now with the time ticking down, it's time for Jack and I to say goodbye. We're finally headed off for college next year. And maybe, who knows, hand this off to a new generation for next year. But for right now, we would like to offer huge thanks to Benjamin Myers, our director, to Joy Yaggett, our station manager, to Bobby Kraus, Jake Goldstein, Gabe Kaufman, our friends of the show, were able to come on and spend some time on set with us. Bobby came in and filled in for us. We couldn't thank him enough. And of course, for all of you who are watching our television broadcast right now, you are the people who make this show happen, and we could not be thankful enough for you. For Jack Worth, I am Carter Woodiel. One last time, so long from Studio 1A.